Head over to miniaturemarket.com where they have thousands of board games at discounted prices, and you can sign up for product alerts. Hello my friends, it's the Game Boy Geek here. Today we're going to be putting our foot on the pedal to the metal, creating heat in our car as we race around different tracks around the world. Today we're taking a look at Heat, Pedal to the Metal from Days of Wonder. It's a racing game. Let me show you how it's played. I'll see you on the other side. Heat, Pedal to the Metal is a racing game where each player is going to get their own cool little car. Every player is going to get their own board. They're actually going to be able to change what gear they're in. They have a little marker here to do that. And here's a close-up of what those cars look like. Now there's actually 4 different racing boards in this game. There's 2 boards, they're both double-sided. This one's USA, tells you how many laps, you're going to do 2 laps. And for instance, we might be starting right there. Now the game's played over multiple rounds of players playing cards. At the beginning of your round, there's a couple of steps that are done simultaneously. Like you can move up or down 1 gear by default, and this tells you how many cards you can play. 1, 2, 3, or 4 if you're in gear 1, 2, 3, or 4. Then you're going to play cards equal to the number of this. Now this is all simultaneous, this part, so I might select a couple of cards and I might put them face down in front of me. Now you have a hand of 7 cards. Then with whoever's first in the race and working your way back, you're going to walk through this flow, which I'll just kind of go over at a high level. For example, I may have played a 3 and a 2. Those are my 2 cards, so I'm going to go 5. And so I could just go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now you notice there's a race line. It's the sort of the thicker line, and that's always where you'll go. So if this player went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they would stay there, and technically they're in second place. Now anytime you end a turn that's right next to somebody, or just behind them, you get to slipstream optionally up to 2 spots. So this player might slipstream and go 1, 2, and then again they just slide close to this. This player might go, this one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Maybe they ended there, they're behind. They could slipstream 2. They could go 1, 2, and then they would just slide up next to the inside race there. So those are some of the things that you'll be doing is playing cards, possibly getting behind or next to people to slipstream. Well, let's say we're going around a corner. This tells me that I'm 4 spots from the corner. 1, 2, 3, 4. This is really easy to see here. This says 7. That's the max speed I can have going through this without creating heat in my car. So let's say I did exactly 7. So I did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I went through this corner. I'm going to check. If it was 7 or less, I'm great, nothing happened. But let's say I was much further back, and let's say I did 10 and I came through here. I went 10 to get through this corner, the speed limit's 7, I'm 3 over. And that's gonna create heat, 3 heat. So every player has a certain amount of these at the beginning of the game, it's 6 for this track. You'll take 3 cards from your heat, and they go into your discard pile. Because it's sort of like a deck builder a little bit, because once you end up going through your deck and you run out, you shuffle your discard pile, which will have cards that you've played before, but also might have heat. Now what happens is once this gets reshuffled and this deck's empty, you have a hand of cards that may have more heat in it. And so over the course of the game, you're gonna pay for that later, because maybe you have a whole hand, you only have 2 cards that move you, but now you have a bunch of heat, right? So this sort of gums up or mucks up your hand. It kind of just, makes it so you can't really do a whole lot. You cannot discard these cards. So from turn to turn, you'll be stuck with these, because at the end of your turn, you get to discard as many cards as you want that can be discarded, not like these, and then draw back up to 7. But these ones get stuck in your hand, so do these ones that we'll talk about later. So it limits your choices and makes it harder if you continue to get heat by going faster through those corners. Now there are ways to get rid of heat because you can't discard them. One is if you're in last place or second to last place in a 5 or more player game, you get 1 cooldown. Also, if you're in second gear, you get a cooldown, or if you're in first gear, you get 3 cooldown. For each cooldown, you can take a heat from your hand and place it back into your engine. So it's giving you, basically putting it back in there. So that's really good with the cooldown. There's some advanced ways to play I'll talk about later, and there's more ways to cool down there as well, but that's how you get rid of those. Now, earlier we talked about this is a stress card. There's a certain amount depending on which race you're in. You cannot discard it, but when you play this card, you must take 1 card from the top of your deck and play it. But if it's not a speed card like this one, it goes to your discard pile. This is one way you can sort of mitigate your heat from hand management, is if you know you have a bunch of heat still in your draw pile, you could play this purposely to try to get rid of it. Now you don't really get rid of it. It just goes to your discard pile. It's gonna come back, right? So it's just like delaying the inevitable, but it is a way to kind of not get it to screw up your hand. So you'll do that, and then you'll draw until you get a speed card like this. And so the stress normally is bad because you don't know what speed's coming up. If you use that near a corner, you might, might be bad, but it can be used to your advantage sometimes too, which is a really interesting thing there. Let's talk about some of the other finer points. Earlier I talked about if you're in last place or second to last in a 5 or more player, you get a cooldown. You also get 1 extra speed. So it's basically helping the people that are in the last catch up a little bit. Now earlier I talked about changing gears, and you can change up 1 or down 1. But you can change up or down 2 gears, but you gain a heat. Anytime you pay heat, again, it's adding the inevitable to later to getting heat. Another way to gain heat is during this step, you can do a boost, which is essentially taking a card from here, just like I did with the stress, and adding it to your thing. You don't know what it's going to be, but it's giving you a little bit of boost. But anytime you do that, again, you have to add a heat, as notated by here. If you do a boost at any gear, you got to add heat. So there's a lot of decisions to making of managing your hand, managing this heat. That's the crux of the game. Now, each player starts with the same deck for the base game, and there are 3 special cards, a 0, a 5, and it's a heat actually. But you can play an advanced game. Now the garage module allows you to draft cards at the beginning to replace your 3 basic cards. So you'll have 3 new ones instead of the old ones. They do all sorts of different things like brakes. They make you get heat, but you can choose what speed you're going that time. Or you can actually remove a certain amount of stress cards from your hand and have certain speeds, or take cards from your deck and put them directly into your discard pile, but maybe you can go faster around corners. Having a bonus, sort of a boost there where you have another card come out, but also, having 3 cooldown, all sorts of different things. And there's a huge deck of cards. And again, you're gonna be drafting 3 cards each race, so your cards are gonna be different from other people's. There's also a weather and road condition module, where the weather conditions will change the race as a whole, like how many heat you may start with, how many stress you may start with, different rules for slipstreaming more or cooling down more or less, all different things. But there's also road conditions where these go on different corners. There's all sorts of different ones, and they affect what's going on either in that corner or in between that corner and the next corner, like with strip streaming, heat, being able to, plus or minus 1 speed and things like that. There's also a Legends module, which helps you add cards if you're not playing with that many players. Any less than 4, they recommend you play with at least 2 Legends. Essentially, it allows you to quickly run cards that are not controlled by people, but it makes it easy to tell where it goes on the track on its turn. It doesn't take a lot of maintenance. You can also do a championship series, which will contain 3 or 4 races in different years. And these, again, you're gonna have multiple races, and each race is gonna have certain things that happen, like each race driver to cross the finish line on lap 1 immediately gets a sponsorship card. I'll talk about that in a moment. They also tell you which map you're using: Great Britain, then USA, then Italy. Those are the different boards of the racetracks. And there's also different things that happen each race between weather and press corners and things like that. Now some of those corners will have those press tokens, and if you go through those corners either slipstreaming through them or going past the speed conditions of 2 or more, you get a sponsorship card because it's exciting for the press. And sponsorship cards, there's a whole deck of them. They do all sorts of different things. They're essentially one-time use abilities, which will give you a speed, and also sometimes an ability like +1 speed or 2 cooldown, and brakes will give you, so it allows you to choose what speed you're going, things like that. They're one-time use. And it comes with this little pad of paper that you can keep track of the scores going through the different races of the championship series. All right, let's first talk about the things I like about the game. Vincent Dutrait is probably my favorite game artist. His art looks amazing here, as it does on everything else he does. It just really draws you in. I love his art style. It looks great on this game. This game is really all about hand management. Yes, it's a racing game. You're trying to be first, but the main thing here is all about hand management of cards and the choices that you have in that hand management and how those choices change throughout the game with all sorts of different things, like the board state. The board state alters your decisions. So you've got different corners, right? Corners coming up, corners you just pass, cards in your hand, cards that are in your deck that you have not yet used this cycle. There's a lot of things to pay attention to there. Slipstreaming. Do I have a pretty good feeling someone's going to be, either I'll be able to slipstream, either they're already there because they moved before and I can slipstream. I know that they're probably going to be there around the corners. And then when you match like slipstreaming with corners, it's like I might try to play just in front of the corner because I know that this other player is probably going to go just past it, and I know where they are now. I know that they don't want to probably put a whole lot of heat going through that too fast. I can bet where I think they're going to be. That'll allow me to get through that corner on a slipstream. Lots of things to actually think about here, more than meets the eye. This game definitely seems very simple at first without a lot of strategy, but the more you play it and the more you really look at the agency of the game, there's quite a bit of depth here of the decisions of your hand management choices. I like the stress cards because in general they sound like they're bad, right? You play a stress card and you got to pull a card till you come up with a speed card, and then you use that speed. But again, you might know which ones are still there. in your deck that you haven't used this cycle. But as I showed in the overview, sometimes you can use the heat, because if you don't pull a card that has the speed on it, the speed logo, it goes to your discard pile, which is like pushing heat away from, instead of clogging up your hand, throwing your discard pile. Sure, it's going to come back a little bit later. You'll still end up paying for it, but you kind of kick that can down the road a little bit, if you will. So you can actually use stress to help you to try to get rid of a bunch of heat in your hand. Again, not getting rid of it, but temporarily getting it out of your hand, because you can't discard it. But in this case, it's kind of a little trick that you can kind of get rid of it there. Deciding which cards to discard. That's true too, where depending on where you're at, on the board state, near at the corners, with the other cards, which cards you want to discard. Maybe you want to discard a bunch to get to the cards you really want. Maybe you don't want to discard any because you got the perfect card. So there's lots of strategy there with that. I like that aspect of it. Also, so the base game is fine. It's good. It's the best. This is one of the games that I'm like, play the base game first. Don't add anything, because it takes a while to get used to the flow of the game, right? And then once you've played at least once, then start adding some of these other things in. All these modules are really cool. The garage module is awesome. Being able to draft different things that makes your card different from everyone else's. That's my favorite module here. Championship module, it's fine. I probably won't do it that often, but it's nice to know that if you want to play a 3-game series and tally up all the points, you can kind of do that. The weather, I pretty much will always use this with people that have played before. It's great to have one overarching thing, but one thing for corners and things in between corners. Legends, I don't typically like things where like I'm managing bots, but the game is definitely better with more cards on there. Like if you're playing a 2 or 3 player game, add some legends. Again, it's not something that you probably want to do in your first play. It's one more thing to think about. So just play with however many players you have your first time. But then if you have less than 4 players, I definitely recommend playing with at least 2 legends. Again, they're not hard. They're either before the line or they're after the line by the legend icon, and then you do one of 2 things. And you just look at the card. It's pretty quick. There's not a lot of maintenance there. And it does make it better for less than 4 players. So I recommend it if you need to. Sponsors, they're fine. I use the garage and the weather every time. I don't use the sponsors every time. They are one-time abilities. They are cool. You do use them with the championship, but it's good to know that you have that option if you want to. I'm going to be asked, I know I'm going to be asked a lot about different racing games in the comments. So I'm just going to go ahead and answer a bunch of your questions before you ask them. For me, this is now my favorite sort of pure racing game in my library. So this has replaced Formula D for me. Formula D is one of those games that's like, it's a classic, but yeah, the strategy as to what gear you're going to be in, but you're rolling dice. And what die you roll depends on what gear you're in and stuff like that. Sure, there's an advanced version, but quite honestly, the advanced version got so fiddly with the different damage in the different areas, it bogged down the game quite a bit for me, that I like the base game of Formula D better than the advanced game, which is the opposite of what I typically like. So this game is, for me, hands down better than Formula D in every way. Other people asked about Flamme Rouge. I am actually a cyclist. I love biking. I love the theme of Flamme Rouge. I liked the game, but it didn't quite have the X factor for me. That also is a hand management card game, but I find this one to be much more engaging than that. And the last one I'll compare it to is Downforce. A lot of people say, well, what do you think about this compared to Downforce? Yes, Downforce is a car racing game. Yes, Downforce is mostly a hand management game. But the fact that that game is all about money and betting and winning, it's not about if you win. Sure, if you win in that game, it could help you win the game, but you don't have to. You can come in dead last and win. So it's very different. It's a completely different game, so I don't even want to compare those two. But I tend to like intriguing games. I tend to like betting. I like that style of game better than a straight racing game. So for that, Downforce, I like better. But it's not really an apples-to-apples comparison. They're really 2 different games, even though they share the same theme and similar gameplay with card play. But again, that game's all about betting and manipulating the bets, where this game is about racing and hand managing your car to win the race. 2 completely different games. I love Downforce. Heat's very good too, but I like Downforce better. But again, they're totally different. This is the thing where like it looks like 2 games. You'd only need one of them in your collection. They're so different feel-wise. You can definitely have both of these racing games. There's other racing games out there that have more going on than this. There's games like Automobiles from AEG and Thunder Alley and things like that. Those tend to, I think, got in its way with some of the mechanisms. Heat is very streamlined. It's pretty easy, especially with the base game. Then you slowly add some of these other things in. And it's sort of, in my opinion, I like that better than those other racing games. On the negative side of things, you might now know halfway that you can't win. Spin outs are bad. You really should never spin out unless you're really recklessly pressing your luck. And I like on the board where they have numbers, it shows you how many spaces to the corner. You might just do math wrong and you might accidentally spin out by doing some math wrong, by not having enough speed, by having way too much speed, not having enough heat to add, things like that. And I didn't really go with that in the overview, but if you take on too much heat, you're going to end up doing bad things. You're either not going to move, you're going to spin out, things like that. And the spin out can really kill you because you know that you're not going to win the game halfway through. But in all reality, if you're actually like calculating the math in your hand and how many steps you are from the corner, you shouldn't spin out. And if you do spin out, it's because you pushed your luck way too far with stress and things like that. So it really shouldn't happen. But if it does happen, and it happens like on the first lap of the race, you're not going to win. And that can be a detriment. The legends, they work fine. Like I said, I still I still would rather play with more real players than playing with like 2 and then 2 legends. It's just more fun to play with more players. So this game definitely shines better with more players. And this is more just a warning. If you're someone who just picked up Ticket to Ride at Target or something like that recently, or you said, hey, what else does Days of Wonder have? And you get this game's gonna have more, it's got more procedural steps than Ticket to Ride. So if you're new to gaming and you just buy this because you like Days of Wonder, you might struggle with the turn flow. It does take, I'd say, halfway through your first lap, or maybe even your whole first lap, to internalize the sort of the flow that you go through each of your turns, to just be able to have it like internalize that you do. So you're not like going this, now what does this mean? Now what does this mean? Now when can I use this? Now what could I have done in this one? It takes a while to like learn what you can do and not in certain steps. But once you get that, the game moves fast. So new players, even new gamers, your first few turns are gonna feel like a little clunky until you finally get it, and then it just hums along. So that's it. That's Heat. I like it. It's a great racing game. This has been a Game Boy Geek, breaking down barriers, growing relationships through board games, helping you for the next one you love. Game Toppers not only transforms your existing table to a high-quality gaming solution, they now offer full leg kits and dining cover solutions for the full table application. Paired with their amazing thematic premium stitch edge mats from noted board game artists like Vincent Dutray, collapsible cup holders, and really cool accessories, it's a complete system that upgrades every game you play. Go to GameToppersLLC.com or click the link below to late pledge for their latest Game Topper 3.5 Kickstarter campaign.